Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 4 of our complete practice question series for the CLF-C02 AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 4. Question number 180. What task is a responsibility of AWS, under the AWS Shared Responsibility Model? Option A, configure identity and access management for applications. Option B, manage encryption options for data that is stored on AWS. Option C, configure security groups for Amazon EC2 instances. Option D, maintain the physical hardware of the infrastructure. The correct answer is D, maintain the physical hardware of the infrastructure. Here is why. AWS is responsible for maintaining and securing the physical hardware that runs AWS services. Why are the other options not correct? A. Customers configure application identities and permissions. B. Customers choose and configure appropriate data encryption options. C. Customers configure security groups for their EC2 instances. Exam tip. AWS manages physical infrastructure. Customers manage data, access, and configurations. Question number 181. An organization has an Amazon EC2 instance in a private subnet. The company needs to initiate a connection to the internet to pull operating system updates while preventing traffic from the internet from accessing the EC2 instance. What AWS managed service allows this? Option A, VPC endpoint. Option B, NAT gateway. Option C, Amazon Private Link. Option D, VPC peering. The correct answer is B, NAT gateway. Here is why. A NAT gateway lets instances in a private subnet initiate outbound internet connections without accepting unsolicited inbound internet connections. Why are the other options not correct? A VPC endpoint provides private access to supported services without internet access. C. Private link provides private connectivity to supported services through VPC endpoints. D. VPC peering privately connects VPCs. Exam tip. Use a NAT gateway for outbound internet access from a private subnet. Question number 182. What actions are the responsibility of AWS, under the AWS Shared Responsibility Model? Choose 2. Option A, securing the virtualization layer. Option B, patching the operating system on Amazon EC2 instances. Option C, enforcing a strict password policy for IAM users. Option D, patching the operating system on Amazon RDS instances. E, configuring security groups and network ACLs. The correct answer is A, securing the virtualization layer, D, patching the operating system on Amazon RDS instances. Here is why. AWS secures the virtualization layer and patches the managed operating environment that supports Amazon RDS. Why are the other options not correct? B. Customers patch guest operating systems on Amazon EC2. C. Customers configure IAM password policies. E. Customers configure security groups and network ACLs. Exam tip. AWS patches managed service infrastructure, EC2 customers patch the guest OS. Question number 183. An organization is storing data that will not be frequently accessed in the AWS cloud. If the company needs to access the data needs to be retrieved within 12 hours. The company wants a solution that is cost-effective for storage costs for each gigabyte. What Amazon S3 storage class can satisfy these requirements? Option A, S3 Standard. Option B, S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval. Option C, S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone IA. Option D, S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard LA. The correct answer is B, S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval. Here is why. S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval provides low-cost archival storage with retrieval options that can return data within 12 hours. Why are the other options not correct? A. S3 Standard is designed for frequently accessed data and has higher storage cost. C. S3 One Zone IA stores infrequent data in one availability zone at a higher storage cost. D. S3 Standard IA provides faster access but costs more per stored gigabyte. Exam tip. Glacier Flexible Retrieval suits archives that can tolerate minutes to hours retrieval. Question number 184. What AWS service or resource can be used to identify services that have been used by a user within a specified date range? Option A, Amazon S3 Access Control Lists, ACLs. Option B, AWS Certificate Manager, ACM. Option C, Network Access Analyzer. Option D, AWS Identity and Access Management Access Analyzer. The correct answer is D. AWS Identity and Access Management Access Analyzer. Here is why. IAM Access Analyzer can analyze access activity for a user over a specified date range and identify the AWS services and actions that were used. Why are the other options not correct? A. S3 ACLs control access to S3 buckets and objects. B. ACM provisions and manages supported TLS certificates. C. Network Access Analyzer identifies network paths that meet defined requirements. Exam tip. IAM Access Analyzer can generate policies from recorded access activity. Question number 185. An organization needs to engage third-party consultants to help maintain and support its AWS environment and the company's business needs. What AWS service or resource can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Support. Option B. AWS Organizations. Option C. AWS Service Catalog. Option D. AWS Partner Network, APN. The correct answer is D. AWS Partner Network, APN. Here is why. The APN connects customers with qualified AWS partners that provide consulting, managed services, maintenance, and business support. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Support provides AWS technical and account assistance, not third-party consultants. B. AWS Organization centrally manages multiple AWS accounts. C. Service Catalog distributes and governs approved cloud products. Exam tip. Use the AWS Partner Network to find qualified third-party AWS consultants. Question number 186. An organization needs to create Amazon QuickSight dashboards every week by using its billing data. What AWS feature or tool can the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Budgets. Option B. AWS Cost Explorer. Option C. AWS Cost and Usage Report. Option D. AWS Cost Anomaly Detection. The correct answer is C. AWS Cost and Usage Report. Here is why. The Cost and Usage Report provides detailed billing data that can be exported and used as a data source for recurring QuickSight dashboards. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Budgets tracks thresholds and sends alerts. B. Cost Explorer provides built-in cost analysis rather than a detailed dashboard data export. D. Cost Anomaly Detection identifies unusual spending patterns. Exam tip. Use cost and usage reports for detailed billing data and custom BI analysis. Question number 187. An organization is planning to move data backups to the AWS cloud. The company needs to replace on-premises storage with storage that is cloud-based but locally cached. What AWS service meets these requirements? Option A. AWS Storage Gateway. Option B. AWS Snowcone. Option C. AWS Backup. Option D. Amazon Elastic File System, Amazon EFS. The correct answer is A. AWS Storage Gateway. Here is why. Storage Gateway connects on-premises applications to cloud storage and can retain frequently accessed data in a local cache. Why are the other options not correct? B. Snowcone is a portable edge and data transfer device. C. AWS Backup centrally manages backups but is not a locally cached storage gateway. D. Amazon EFS provides managed file storage inside AWS. Exam tip. Storage Gateway extends AWS storage on premises with local caching. Question number 188. An organization needs to plan, schedule, and run hundreds of thousands of computing jobs on AWS. What AWS service can a company use to satisfy this requirement? Option A. AWS Step Functions. Option B. AWS Service Catalog. Option C. Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. Option D. AWS Batch. The correct answer is D. AWS Batch. Here is why. AWS Batch plans, schedules, and runs large numbers of batch computing jobs while provisioning the required compute resources. Why are the other options not correct? A. Step Functions coordinates application workflows. B. Service Catalog distributes approved cloud products. C. Amazon SQS provides message queues but does not run computing jobs. Exam tip. Use AWS Batch to schedule and run large-scale batch workloads. Question number 189. What AWS services or features provide high availability and low latency by enabling failover across different AWS regions? Choose 2. Option A. Amazon Route 53. Option B. Network Load Balancer. Option C. Amazon S3 Transfer Acceleration. Option D. AWS Global Accelerator. E. Application Load Balancer. The correct answer is A. Amazon Route 53, D. AWS Global Accelerator. Here is why. Route 53 supports health-based DNS failover, while Global Accelerator routes users to healthy regional endpoints through the AWS Global Network. Why are the other options not correct? B. A network load balancer distributes traffic within a region. C. S3 transfer acceleration speeds S3 transfers but does not provide application failover. E. An application load balancer is a regional load balancer. Exam tip. Route 53 and Global Accelerator can direct traffic across regions to healthy endpoints. Question number 190. Which one of the following is a way to use Amazon EC2 auto-scaling groups to scale capacity in the AWS cloud? Option A. Scale the number of EC2 instances in or out automatically, based on demand. Option B. Use serverless EC2 instances. Option C. Scale the size of EC2 instances up or down automatically, based on demand. Option D. Transfer unused CPU resources between EC2 instances. The correct answer is A. Scale the number of EC2 instances in or out automatically, based on demand. Here is why. An EC2 auto-scaling group adds or removes instances to maintain desired capacity and respond to workload demand. Why are the other options not correct? B. EC2 instances are virtual servers, not serverless compute. C. Auto-scaling groups change instance count rather than instance size automatically. D. CPU capacity cannot be transferred between instances. Exam tip. EC2 auto-scaling performs horizontal scaling by changing the instance count. Question number 191. What abilities or benefits of the AWS cloud? Choose 2. Option A. Trade variable expenses for capital expenses. Option B, deploy globally in minutes. Option C, plan capacity in advance of deployments. Option D, take advantage of economies of scale. E, reduce dependencies on network connectivity. The correct answer is B, deploy globally in minutes. D, take advantage of economies of scale. Here is why. AWS provides rapidly deployable global infrastructure and lower unit costs through large-scale shared operations. Why are the other options not correct? A, AWS trades fixed or capital expense for variable expense, not the reverse. C, elasticity reduces the need to predict capacity far in advance. E, cloud workloads still depend on network connectivity. Exam tip. AWS provides global reach, rapid deployment, elasticity, and economies of scale. Question number 192. What AWS security service protects applications from distributed denial of service attacks with always-on detection and automatic inline mitigations? Option A, Amazon Inspector. Option B, AWS Web Application Firewall, AWS WAF. Option C, Elastic Load Balancing, ELB. Option D, AWS Shield. The correct answer is D, AWS Shield. Here is why. AWS Shield provides always-on detection and automatic inline mitigation against distributed denial of service attacks. Why are the other options not correct? A, Inspector identifies vulnerabilities in supported workloads. B, AWS WAF filters supported web requests by using rules. C, Elastic Load Balancing distributes application traffic across targets. Exam tip. Shield protects against DDoS attacks, WAF filters malicious web requests. Question number 193. What Amazon EC2 instance pricing model can provide discounts of up to 90%? Option A, reserved instances. Option B, on demand. Option C, dedicated hosts. Option D, spot instances. The correct answer is D, spot instances. Here is why. Spot instances use spare EC2 capacity and can provide discounts of up to 90% compared with on-demand prices. Why are the other options not correct? A, reserved instances provide commitment discounts but not the stated maximum discount. B, on-demand instances use standard rates without a usage commitment. C, dedicated hosts provide dedicated physical servers for licensing or isolation. Exam tip. Spot provides the largest EC2 discount but can be interrupted. Question number 194. Which one of the following acts as an instance-level firewall to control inbound and outbound access? Option A, Network Access Control List. Option B, Security Groups. Option C, AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D, Virtual Private Gateways. The correct answer is B, Security Groups. Here is why. Security groups are stateful virtual firewalls that control inbound and outbound traffic for associated instances and network interfaces. Why are the other options not correct? A, network ACLs are stateless controls applied at the subnet level. C, Trusted Advisor provides best practice recommendations. D, virtual private gateways support private network connectivity. Exam tip. Security groups protect instances, network ACLs protect subnets. Question number 195. What AWS service can a company use to securely store and encrypt passwords for a database? Option A, AWS Shield. Option B, AWS Secrets Manager. Option C, AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. Option D, Amazon Cognito. The correct answer is B, AWS Secrets Manager. Here is why. Secrets Manager securely stores and encrypts database credentials and can automate their rotation. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Shield provides DDoS protection. C. IAM controls identities and permissions but is not a database secret store. D. Cognito provides identity services for applications. Exam tip. Use Secrets Manager for encrypted database credentials and managed rotation. Question number 196. What can a cloud practitioner use to retrieve AWS security and compliance documents and submit them as evidence to an auditor or regulator? Option A. AWS Certificate Manager. Option B. AWS Systems Manager. Option C. AWS Artifact. Option D. Amazon Inspector. The correct answer is C. AWS Artifact. Here is why. AWS Artifact provides on-demand access to AWS security and compliance reports that customers can supply to auditors and regulators. Why are the other options not correct? A. ACM provisions and manages supported TLS certificates. B. Systems Manager helps manage and operate AWS resources. D. Inspector performs vulnerability management for supported workloads. Exam tip. AWS Artifact is the self-service source for AWS compliance reports and agreements. Question number 197. What AWS service is used to track, record, and audit configuration changes made to AWS resources? Option A. AWS Shield. Option B. AWS Config. Option C. AWS IAM. Option D. Amazon Inspector. The correct answer is B. AWS Config. Here is why. AWS Config records resource configurations, tracks changes over time, and evaluates resources against configuration rules. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Shield provides DDoS protection. C. IAM manages identities and permissions. D. Inspector scans supported workloads for vulnerabilities. Exam tip. Config tracks resource configuration, CloudTrail records API activity. Question number 198. A customer runs an on-demand Amazon Linux EC2 instance for 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds. For how much time will the customer be billed? Option A. 3 hours, 5 minutes. Option B. 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds. Option C. 3 hours, 6 minutes. Option D. 4 hours. The correct answer is B. 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds. Here is why. Amazon Linux on-demand EC2 usage is billed per second after a 60-second minimum, so the entire running duration is billed exactly. Why are the other options not correct? A. Billing does not discard the additional 6 seconds. C. The usage is not rounded up to the next full minute. D. The usage is not rounded up to the next full hour. Exam tip. Eligible EC2 Linux usage is billed per second with a 60-second minimum. Question number 199. What cloud concept is demonstrated by using AWS Compute Optimizer? Option A. Security validation. Option B. Right-sizing. Option C. Elasticity. Option D. Global reach. The correct answer is B. Right-sizing. Here is why. Compute Optimizer analyzes utilization and recommends suitable resource configurations to reduce over-provisioning or improve performance. Why are the other options not correct? A. Compute Optimizer does not validate application security. C. Elasticity adjusts capacity dynamically as demand changes. D. Global reach refers to deploying workloads across geographic locations. Exam tip. Compute Optimizer supports right-sizing through utilization-based recommendations. Question number 200. Who enables encryption of data at rest for Amazon Elastic Block Store, Amazon EBS? Option A. AWS Support. Option B. AWS Customers. Option C. AWS Key Management Service, AWS KMS. Option D. AWS Trusted Advisor. The correct answer is B. AWS Customers. Here is why. Customers choose and enable EBS encryption as part of securing their data in the cloud. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Support does not configure a customer's EBS encryption settings. C. AWS KMS supplies encryption keys, but the customer enables the EBS encryption setting. D. Trusted Advisor provides recommendations rather than enabling encryption. Exam tip. Customers enable EBS encryption, AWS KMS provides the encryption keys. Question number 201. What AWS service or feature will search for and identify AWS resources that are shared externally? Option A. Amazon Open Search Service. Option B. AWS Control Tower. Option C. AWS IAM Access Analyzer. Option D. AWS Fargate. The correct answer is C. AWS IAM Access Analyzer. Here is why. IAM Access Analyzer examines resource policies and identifies AWS resources that permit access from outside the defined trust boundary. Why are the other options not correct? A. Open Search Service provides search and analytics capabilities. B. Control Tower establishes and governs multi-account environments. D. Fargate provides serverless compute for containers. Exam tip. IAM Access Analyzer identifies resources shared with external principals. Question number 202. At what support level do users receive access to a support concierge? Option A. Basic support. Option B. Developer support. Option C. Business support. Option D. Enterprise support. The correct answer is D. Enterprise support. Here is why. Enterprise support provides enhanced billing and account assistance historically known as the AWS Support Concierge Service. Why are the other options not correct? A. Basic support provides standard account and billing assistance. B. Developer support does not include the enterprise concierge level service. C. Business support does not include the enterprise concierge level service. Exam tip. Legacy questions associate AWS Support Concierge with enterprise support. Question number 203. An organization needs to migrate to AWS and use the same security software it uses on premises. The security software vendor offers its security software as a service on AWS. Where can the company purchase the security solution? Option A. AWS Partner Solutions Finder. Option B. AWS Support Center. Option C. AWS Management Console. Option D. AWS Marketplace. The correct answer is D. AWS Marketplace. Here is why. AWS Marketplace is a digital catalog where customers can discover, purchase, and deploy third-party software and services that run on AWS. Why are the other options not correct? A. Partner Solutions Finder helps locate AWS partners and their offerings. B. Support Center is used to manage AWS support cases. C. The Management Console manages AWS resources but is not the software marketplace. Exam tip. Use AWS Marketplace to buy third-party software with integrated AWS procurement. Question number 204. An organization that has AWS Enterprise support is launching a new version of a popular product in 2 months. The company expects a large increase in traffic to its website. The website is hosted on Amazon EC2 instances. What action should the company take to assess its readiness to scale for this launch? Option A. Replace the EC2 instances with AWS Lambda functions. Option B. Use AWS Infrastructure Event Management (IEM) support. Option C. Submit a request on AWS Marketplace to monitor the event. Option D. Review the coverage reports in the AWS Cost Management Console. The correct answer is B. Use AWS Infrastructure Event Management (IEM) support. Here is why. IEM was the enterprise support event readiness service for architecture, scaling, capacity, and launch planning. Its current replacement is AWS Countdown. Why are the other options not correct? A. Replacing EC2 with Lambda is unnecessary and does not assess launch readiness. C. AWS Marketplace does not provide enterprise launch readiness monitoring. D. Cost coverage reports do not assess technical scaling readiness. Exam tip. AWS Countdown replaced IEM for critical launch and event planning. Question number 205. What is the customer always responsible for managing, under the AWS Shared Responsibility Model? Option A. Software licenses. Option B. Networking. Option C. Customer data. Option D. Encryption keys. The correct answer is C. Customer data. Here is why. Customers always retain responsibility for their data, including classification, protection, permissions, and appropriate use. Why are the other options not correct? A. Software licensing responsibility depends on the service and licensing model. B. Networking responsibilities are shared and vary by service. D. Encryption keys can be AWS-owned, AWS-managed, or customer-managed. Exam tip. Customers are always responsible for their data, regardless of the AWS service used. Question number 206. What AWS service enables users to check for vulnerabilities on Amazon EC2 instances by using predefined assessment templates? Option A. AWS WAF. Option B. AWS Trusted Advisor. Option C. Amazon Inspector. Option D. AWS Shield. The correct answer is C. Amazon Inspector. Here is why. Amazon Inspector is the AWS Vulnerability Management Service for supported EC2 workloads. Older versions used predefined assessment templates. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS WAF filters supported web requests. B. Trusted Advisor provides broad best practice recommendations. D. AWS Shield provides DDoS protection. Exam tip. Inspector identifies software vulnerabilities, Guard Duty detects threats. Question number 207. What encryption types can be used to protect objects at rest in Amazon S3? Choose 2. Option A. Server-side encryption with Amazon S3 Managed Encryption Keys, SSES3. Option B. Server-side encryption with AWS KMS Managed Keys, SSEKMS. Option C. TLS. Option D. SSL. E. Transparent Data Encryption, TDE. The correct answer is A. Server-side encryption with Amazon S3 Managed Keys, SSES3. B. Server-side encryption with AWS KMS Managed Keys, SSEKMS. Here is why. SSES3 and SSEKMS encrypt S3 objects at rest by using S3 managed or KMS-based encryption keys. Why are the other options not correct? C. TLS protects data in transit. D. SSL is a legacy transport encryption protocol, not S3 encryption at rest. E. TDE is a database encryption technology. Exam tip. SSES3 and SSEKMS protect S3 data at rest, TLS protects data in transit. Question number 208. Which one of the following is a recommended design principle for AWS cloud architecture? Option A. Design tightly coupled components. Option B. Build a single application component that can handle all the application functionality. Option C. Make large changes on fewer iterations to reduce chances of failure. Option D. Avoid monolithic architecture by segmenting workloads. The correct answer is D. Avoid monolithic architecture by segmenting workloads. Here is why. Segmenting workloads into loosely coupled components improves scalability, maintainability, and fault isolation. Why are the other options not correct? A. Tight coupling increases dependencies and failure impact. B. A single all-purpose component creates a monolithic architecture. C. Prefer frequent, small, reversible changes rather than infrequent large changes. Exam tip. Design loosely coupled components and avoid unnecessary monolithic dependencies. Question number 209. A user has limited knowledge of AWS services, but needs to quickly deploy a scalable Node.js application in the AWS cloud. What service should be used to deploy the application? Option A. AWS CloudFormation. Option B. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Option C. Amazon EC2. Option D. AWS OpsWorks. The correct answer is B. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Here is why. Elastic Beanstalk quickly deploys and scales supported applications while automatically provisioning and managing the required AWS resources. Why are the other options not correct? A. CloudFormation requires infrastructure templates and more direct resource definition. C. Amazon EC2 requires the user to provision and manage virtual servers. D. OpsWorks provides configuration management for supported workloads. Exam tip. Elastic Beanstalk deploys application code while managing the underlying environment. Question number 210. An organization has teams that have different job roles and responsibilities. The company's employees often change teams. The company needs to manage permissions for the employees so that the permissions are appropriate for the job responsibilities. What IAM resource should the company use to satisfy this requirement with the least operational overhead? Option A. IAM user groups. Option B. IAM roles. Option C. IAM instance profiles. Option D. IAM policies for individual users. The correct answer is A. IAM user groups. Here is why. IAM user groups let administrators assign permissions by job function and move users between groups as their team responsibilities change. Why are the other options not correct? B. IAM roles provide temporary or assumed permissions rather than organizing IAM users. C. Instance profiles deliver IAM role credentials to EC2 instances. D. Individual user policies create unnecessary administrative overhead. Exam tip. Use IAM groups to manage permissions for users who share the same job function. Question number 211. A user needs to quickly deploy a non-relational database on AWS. The user does not want to manage the underlying hardware or the database software. What AWS service can be used to accomplish this? Option A. Amazon RDS. Option B. Amazon DynamoDB. Option C. Amazon Aurora. Option D. Amazon Redshift. The correct answer is B. Amazon DynamoDB. Here is why. DynamoDB is a serverless, fully managed NoSQL database that removes hardware and database software administration. Why are the other options not correct? A. Amazon RDS is primarily for managed relational databases. C. Amazon Aurora is a relational database compatible with MySQL and PostgreSQL. D. Amazon Redshift is a managed data warehouse. Exam tip. DynamoDB is fully managed NoSQL, RDS and Aurora are relational databases. Question number 212. What actions are examples of a company's effort to right-size its AWS resources to control cloud costs? Choose 2. Option A. Switch from Amazon RDS to Amazon DynamoDB to accommodate NoSQL datasets. Option B. Base the selection of Amazon EC2 instance types on past utilization patterns. Option C. Use Amazon S3 lifecycle policies to move objects that users access infrequently to lower-cost storage tiers. Option D. Use multi-availability zone deployments for Amazon RDS. E. Replace existing Amazon EC2 instances with AWS Elastic Beanstalk. The correct answer is B. Base EC2 instance types on past utilization patterns. C. Use S3 lifecycle policies to move infrequently accessed objects. Here is why. Utilization data helps select appropriate EC2 capacity, while S3 lifecycle moves objects to storage classes that better match their access patterns. Why are the other options not correct? A. Changing database type addresses the data model, not resource right-sizing. D. Multi-availability zone improves availability and usually adds cost. E. Elastic Beanstalk changes the deployment method without directly right-sizing instances. Exam tip. Right-sizing matches compute and storage resources to actual workload usage. Question number 213. An organization that uses AWS needs to transfer 2 terabytes of data. What type of transfer of that data would result in no cost for the company? Option A. Inbound data transfer from the Internet. Option B. Outbound data transfer to the Internet. Option C. Data transfer between AWS regions. Option D. Data transfer between availability zones. The correct answer is A. Inbound data transfer from the Internet. Here is why. Data transfer into AWS from the Internet is generally provided at no additional charge. Why are the other options not correct? B. Outbound transfer to the Internet commonly incurs charges. C. Data transfer between AWS regions commonly incurs charges. D. Cross-availability zone data transfer can incur charges. Exam tip. Data transfer into AWS is usually free, outbound and cross-region transfer often cost. Question number 214. An organization has deployed an Amazon EC2 instance. What option is an AWS responsibility under the AWS shared responsibility model? Option A. Managing and encrypting application data. Option B. Installing updates and security patches of guest operating system. Option C. Configuration of infrastructure devices. Option D. Configuration of security groups on each instance. The correct answer is C. Configuration of infrastructure devices. Here is why. AWS configures and maintains the physical infrastructure and underlying devices that provide Amazon EC2. Why are the other options not correct? A. Customers protect and manage their application data. B. Customers patch the guest operating system on EC2. D. Customers configure security groups associated with their instances. Exam tip. AWS manages underlying infrastructure, EC2 customers manage the guest OS and data. Question number 215. An organization needs to query its server logs to gain insights about its customers' experiences. What AWS service will store this data most cost-effectively? Option A. Amazon Aurora. Option B. Amazon Elastic File System, Amazon EFS. Option C. Amazon Elastic Block Store, Amazon EBS. Option D. Amazon S3. The correct answer is D. Amazon S3. Here is why. Amazon S3 provides scalable, durable, and cost-effective object storage for server logs that can later be queried and analyzed. Why are the other options not correct? A. Aurora is a relational database and is unnecessarily costly for raw log storage. B. EFS provides shared file storage. C. EBS provides block storage for compute workloads. Exam tip. Store large log datasets in S3 and query them with services such as Athena. Question number 216. What AWS service or tool can be used to capture information about inbound and outbound traffic in an Amazon VPC? Option A, VPC flow logs. Option B, Amazon Inspector. Option C, VPC endpoint services. Option D, NAT Gateway. The correct answer is A, VPC flow logs. Here is why. VPC flow logs capture information about IP traffic going to and from network interfaces in a VPC. Why are the other options not correct? B. Inspector scans supported workloads for vulnerabilities. C. VPC endpoint services provide private service connectivity. D. A NAT gateway provides outbound connectivity for private subnets. Exam tip. VPC flow logs record network flow metadata, Cloud Trail Records API activity. Question number 217. What AWS service can be used to retrieve compliance reports on demand? Option A. AWS Secrets Manager. Option B. AWS Artifact. Option C. AWS Security Hub. Option D. AWS Certificate Manager. The correct answer is B. AWS Artifact. Here is why. AWS Artifact provides on-demand access to AWS security and compliance reports. Why are the other options not correct? A. Secrets Manager stores and rotates application secrets. C. Security Hub aggregates and manages security findings. D. Certificate Manager provisions and manages supported TLS certificates. Exam tip. Use AWS Artifact to download AWS compliance reports and agreements. Question number 218. An organization is building an application that requires the ability to send, store, and receive messages between application components. The company has another requirement to process messages in first in, first out, FIFO order. What AWS service should the company use? Option A. AWS Step Functions. Option B. Amazon Simple Notification Service, Amazon SNS. Option C. Amazon Kinesis Data Streams. Option D. Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. The correct answer is D. Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. Here is why. Amazon SQS FIFO queues send, store, and receive messages while preserving message order within each message group. Why are the other options not correct? A. Step Functions coordinates workflows rather than providing a message queue. B. SNS provides publish-subscribe messaging. C. Kinesis Data Streams processes streaming data rather than durable application queues. Exam tip. Use an SQS FIFO queue when ordered, durable message processing is required. Question number 219. An organization needs to migrate its PostgreSQL database to AWS. The company does not use the database frequently. What AWS service or resource can satisfy these requirements with the least management overhead? Option A. PostgreSQL on Amazon EC2. Option B. Amazon RDS for PostgreSQL. Option C. Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL Compatible Edition. Option D. Amazon Aurora Serverless. The correct answer is D. Amazon Aurora Serverless. Here is why. Aurora Serverless supports PostgreSQL compatibility and automatically adjusts database capacity for intermittent usage with minimal management. Why are the other options not correct? A. PostgreSQL on EC2 requires operating system and database administration. B. RDS for PostgreSQL is managed but uses provisioned database capacity. C. Provisioned Aurora requires more capacity planning than Aurora Serverless. Exam tip. Aurora Serverless suits intermittent relational workloads with variable demand. Question number 220. What AWS service helps users audit API activity across their AWS account? Option A. AWS Cloud Trail. Option B. Amazon Inspector. Option C. AWS WAF. Option D. AWS Config. The correct answer is A. AWS Cloud Trail. Here is why. Cloud Trail records actions taken through the console, CLI, SDKs, and AWS APIs for account auditing. Why are the other options not correct? B. Inspector performs vulnerability management. C. AWS WAF filter supported web requests. D. AWS Config tracks resource configurations and configuration changes. Exam tip. Cloud Trail audits API activity, AWS Config tracks resource configuration. Question number 221. What action will help increase security in the AWS cloud? Option A. Enable programmatic access for all IAM users. Option B. Use IAM users instead of IAM roles to delegate permissions. Option C. Rotate access keys on a recurring basis. Option D. Use inline policies instead of customer-managed policies. The correct answer is C. Rotate access keys on a recurring basis. Here is why. Regular access key rotation reduces the period during which a compromised long-term credential can be used. Why are the other options not correct? A. Programmatic access should be granted only when required. B. IAM roles are preferred for delegated temporary access. D. Customer-managed policies are generally easier to reuse and govern than inline policies. Exam tip. Prefer temporary credentials, rotate long-term access keys when they are necessary. Question number 222. Which one of the following describes some of the core functionality of Amazon S3? Option A. Amazon S3 is a high-performance block storage service that is designed for use with Amazon EC2. Option B. Amazon S3 is an object storage service that provides high-level performance, security, scalability, and data availability. Option C. Amazon S3 is a fully managed, highly reliable, and scalable file storage system that is accessible over the industry standard SMB protocol. Option D. Amazon S3 is a scalable, fully managed elastic NFS for use with AWS cloud services and on-premises resources. The correct answer is B. Amazon S3 is an object storage service that provides high-level performance, security, scalability, and data availability. Here is why. Amazon S3 is an object storage service designed for scalable, secure, highly available storage of virtually any amount of data. Why are the other options not correct? A. Amazon EBS provides block storage for EC2. C. Amazon FSx for Windows File Server provides managed SMB file storage. D. Amazon EFS provides managed NFS file storage. Exam tip. S3 is object storage, EBS is block storage, and EFS or FSx provides file storage. Question number 223. What AWS benefit is demonstrated by on-demand technology services that enable companies to replace upfront fixed expenses with variable expenses? Option A. High availability. Option B. Economies of scale. Option C. Pay-as-you-go pricing. Option D. Global reach. The correct answer is C. Pay-as-you-go pricing. Here is why. Pay-as-you-go pricing replaces large upfront infrastructure purchases with usage-based variable expenses. Why are the other options not correct? A. High availability concerns continued operation during failures. B. Economies of scale help AWS lower per unit costs. D. Global reach is the ability to deploy in geographic locations worldwide. Exam tip. Pay-as-you-go trades upfront fixed expense for usage-based variable expense. Question number 224. An organization hosts an application on multiple Amazon EC2 instances. The application uses Amazon's Simple Notification Service, Amazon SNS, to send messages. What AWS service or feature will give the application permission to access required AWS services? Option A. AWS Certificate Manager, ACM. Option B. IAM roles. Option C. AWS Security Hub. Option D. Amazon Guard Duty. The correct answer is B. IAM roles. Here is why. An IAM role gives applications on EC2 temporary permissions to call services such as Amazon SNS without storing long-term access keys. Why are the other options not correct? A. ACM manages supported TLS certificates. C. Security Hub aggregates security findings. D. Guard Duty detects threats from supported data sources. Exam tip. Attach an IAM role to EC2 when applications need AWS service permissions. Question number 225. What AWS service allows users to model and provision AWS resources using common programming languages? Option A. AWS Cloud Formation. Option B. AWS Code Pipeline. Option C. AWS Cloud Development Kit, AWS CDK. Option D. AWS Systems Manager. The correct answer is C. AWS Cloud Development Kit, AWS CDK. Here is why. AWS CDK lets developers define and provision AWS resources with familiar programming languages through AWS Cloud Formation. Why are the other options not correct? A. Cloud Formation primarily uses declarative templates. B. Code Pipeline automates continuous delivery workflows. D. Systems Manager helps manage and operate supported resources. Exam tip. AWS CDK defines infrastructure with programming languages and deploys through Cloud Formation. Question number 226. An organization wants a customized assessment of its current on-premises environment. The company needs to understand its projected running costs in the AWS cloud. What AWS service or tool can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Trusted Advisor. Option B. Amazon Inspector. Option C. AWS Control Tower. Option D. Migration Evaluator. The correct answer is D. Migration Evaluator. Here is why. Migration Evaluator assesses on-premises workloads and produces projected AWS cost estimates and potential savings. Why are the other options not correct? A. Trusted Advisor evaluates an existing AWS environment. B. Inspector scans supported workloads for vulnerabilities. C. Control Tower establishes and governs multi-account AWS environments. Exam tip. Migration Evaluator builds a cost-based business case for migration to AWS. Question number 227. An organization needs to migrate a PostgreSQL database from on-premises to Amazon RDS. What AWS service or tool should the company use to satisfy this requirement? Option A. Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool. Option B. AWS Migration Hub. Option C. AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. Option D. AWS Application Migration Service. The correct answer is C. AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. Here is why. AWS DMS can migrate an on-premises PostgreSQL database to Amazon RDS for PostgreSQL. Why are the other options not correct? A. The readiness tool assesses organizational migration preparedness. B. Migration Hub tracks migrations but does not perform the database transfer itself. D. Application Migration Service performs lift and shift server migrations. Exam tip. Use AWS DMS to migrate supported databases with minimal source downtime. Question number 228. An organization needs to store data in Amazon S3. The company rarely accesses the data, and the data can be regenerated if necessary. The company needs to store the data in the most cost-effective storage class. What S3 storage class can satisfy this requirement? Option A, S3 Standard. Option B, S3 Intelligent Tiering. Option C, S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard IA. Option D, S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone LA. The correct answer is D, S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone IA. Here is why. S3 One Zone IA offers lower cost storage in one availability zone for infrequently accessed data that can be recreated. Why are the other options not correct? A. S3 Standard costs more and is intended for frequently accessed data. B. Intelligent tiering adds monitoring and automatically moves data between tiers. C. Standard IA stores data across multiple availability zones and costs more than one zone IA. Exam tip. Use one zone IA for recreatable, infrequently accessed data. Question number 229. An organization needs to integrate its online shopping website with social media login credentials. What AWS service can a company use to make this integration? Option A. AWS Directory Service. Option B. AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. Option C. Amazon Cognito. Option D. AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS Single Sign-On. The correct answer is C. Amazon Cognito. Here is why. Amazon Cognito integrates web and mobile applications with social identity providers such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. Why are the other options not correct? A. Directory Service provides managed directory capabilities. B. IAM manages access to AWS resources, not customer social login. D. IAM Identity Center provides workforce access to accounts and business applications. Exam tip. Use Cognito for customer authentication and social sign-in in applications. Question number 230. An organization is hosting an application in the AWS cloud. The company needs to verify that underlying AWS services and general AWS infrastructure are operating normally. What combination of AWS services can the company use to gather the required information? Choose 2. Option A. AWS Personal Health Dashboard. Option B. AWS Systems Manager. Option C. AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D. AWS Service Health Dashboard. E. AWS Service Catalog. The correct answer is A. AWS Personal Health Dashboard, D. AWS Service Health Dashboard. Here is why. The Personal Health Dashboard showed account-specific events, while the Service Health Dashboard showed general AWS service status. Both are now part of AWS Health Dashboard. Why are the other options not correct? B. Systems Manager operates and manages supported resources. C. Trusted Advisor provides best practice recommendations. E. Service Catalog distributes approved cloud products. Exam tip. AWS Health Dashboard includes service-wide status and account-specific health events. Question number 231. An organization is using Amazon DynamoDB for its application database. What tasks are the responsibility of AWS, under the AWS Shared Responsibility Model? Choose 2. Option A. Classify data. Option B. Configure access permissions. Option C. Manage encryption options. Option D. Provide public endpoints to store and retrieve data. E. Manage the infrastructure layer and the operating system. The correct answer is D. Provide public endpoints to store and retrieve data. E. Manage the infrastructure layer and the operating system. Here is why. For DynamoDB, AWS operates the infrastructure, operating environment, and service endpoints used to store and retrieve data. Why are the other options not correct? A. Customers classify their data. B. Customers configure identities and access permissions. C. Customers select and manage the appropriate encryption key options. Exam tip. AWS manages DynamoDB infrastructure, customers manage data, access, and encryption choices. You have completed part 4 of the CLF-C02 practice series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.